public to comply with the Open Public Meetings Act. The purpose of this special meeting is a policy work session. I will call roll for all of the board members. If you are here, please say present. Director Song?
Present.
Director Cook? I have that Director Cook may be attending maybe later via Zoom. Director Clark?
Present.
Vice President Farah?
Present.
And then myself. To kick us off, Superintendent Vela, could you start us off?
Thank you, President Margell, members of the board. Thank you and my team for being here tonight. It's been a minute or so since we had an opportunity to come back and do the work of the work as Board Superintendent Governance team around policy. I know this is an extended evening. However, I've been told by Ms. Holly that she's going to make it so exciting and entertaining that we're going to be so engaged. So, and my team is prepared for that as well. But no, seriously,
Fantastic.
I wanted just to take a moment to thank you for the, and my team in particular, around the work that needs to be aligned with board policy once that you reach the final readings. And so I just wanted to say that. And without further ado, I wanted to turn it over to Ms. Holly, our policy coordinator, to set the stage for the evening and also list out kind of the cadence and order of the policies we'll be working on tonight. Ms. Holly.
Good evening, President Margell, members of the board, Superintendent Vela, and Team KSD. I appreciate everybody being here to help provide answers that are needed. I think Superintendent Vela was making fun of me, but it might be really exciting. You never know. I'm just going to whip through the PowerPoint quickly. You all have a copy in front of you just to touch on some things. I did want to start by saying that in the fall of 2022, the board made it their priority to go through essential policies first, and that is the bulk of what we have. Some others have been brought forward, some as fillers, some as things that people asked to be brought forward. So just real quickly, we talk about policy making. That's one of the major functions of the board in a school district. Talk about the classifications. Again, these are the 3 classifications of policies. And again, we focus on the essentials. We're going to start with a second reading of 5201, Drug-Free Schools, Community and Workplace. 3422, Student Sports, Concussion, Head Injury, and Sudden Cardiac Arrest, first reading. I might also mention that we have 4 new policies here, and you'll see them as we go through. Policy 2021, Library Information and Technology Program, second reading. We're retiring 6023, Bank Account Petty Cash Authorization. Policy 6216, Reimbursement for Goods and Services, Warrants and Unclaimed or Reissued Warrants. This is first reading. 6217, also a first reading, Electronic Funds Transfer. 6570, Property and Data Management, first reading. 6801, Capital Assets and Theft-Sensitive Assets, first reading. Policy 4200, Parent Access, Visitors, and Safe and Orderly Learning Environment. This policy is new to KSD. Policy 4210, Regulation of Dangerous Weapons on School Premises, first reading. Policy 4311, Visitors. It's retired from the number only. It's being put in the previous policy that I just mentioned to make way for Policy 4311, School Safety and Security Services Program, which is a first reading. 6511, Staff Safety. 6895, Pesticide Notification, Posting and Record Keeping, first reading. 6605, Student Safety, Walking, Biking, Riding Buses, and School Patrol. Although it says first reading, we revised it in October of 2023 to add Safety Patrol into this. That's the only change we made at that time. That's why it's being brought back. Policy 6600, Transportation, first reading. 1610, Conflicts of Interest, first reading. 1620, the board superintendent relationship and the superintendent's duties. This is a combination policy. And any policies moving forward will appear on an upcoming regular meeting agenda. If we have to bring it back for a second or third reading, we'll do that in probably September is my guess. Okay, so let me start with the discussion of our 18 policies. We're coming back to 5201, and this is a policy that Director Clark had asked for more restrictive language in as far as notification of conviction. And let me pull it up. It has now been updated to read as soon as possible, but no later than 5 days for notification of conviction. And I believe Ms. Anita McPherson will address why it wasn't put in as immediately.
Thank you. We had some discussion that immediately there may be circumstances in which somebody may not be able to report immediately, and it also put a little bit of confusion into what does immediately mean. When we talked about it, discussing as soon as possible, and also putting a numerical number to that reporting helps us clearly define whether somebody is in violation of that policy or not, and makes it a little bit more applicable to, for instance, when somebody returns to work, then they should be, as soon as possible, able to report that.
Any questions on that?
I forgot last time we were talking about this. What was the significance of the 5-day?
Oh,
What was that? I forgot. You told us something.
I apologize. Bree Adams was here for the first reading. I remember the second reading. I actually do not recall the conversation.
That was the language in there for notification, and Director Clark had asked that it be more restrictive. He thought 5 days was, I think, too much time. Is that correct, Director Clark?
Yeah. So we kept the 5 days.
No later than, as soon as possible, but no later than 5 days.
I was going to say more like 3 days, because
Well,
if it's weekend.
There's a trap there, because you're assuming everybody's working in a 5-day work schedule, and that, so you're catching it both ways here is better.
yeah, no, I do recall thank you for the
Right.
question. I recall the conversation that this language would still allow us to do it sooner if possible, if there's a weekend there, still allow us to do that, but it didn't bind our hands if there was a weekend
Right.
there, so.
Director Farrar, you can see the language there that's highlighted, and that was the addition
Possible,
made.
I see that. And it says 10 days, such a conviction, regardless of, yes.
All right, we're just going for consensus here, I assume?
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody got an objection?
Move it forward?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
The next policy is 3422. It is student sports, concussion, head injury, and sudden cardiac arrest. This policy reflects state training requirements for coaches, as well as a separate requirement for any nonprofit using our facilities to distribute information about concussions, head injuries, and sudden cardiac arrest. And I will say that policy is new to KSD, but Brian Smith, our Director of Athletics and Activities, has been disseminating this information for a long time. I found it incredibly interesting that he told me that defibrillators are mapped out across the district, and coaches are encouraged to download the PulsePoint AED app, which shows the locations of those at all of the schools and stadiums in our area. Any questions?
Just a question on that one, actually, is many of our sports that are, I think about right now, yes, great that it's inside the school in the locker room, but the boys are playing football outside, or the kids are playing football outside. We do have our girls players too, and my apologies for that. Or they're playing at Petrovitsky Park, or they're playing at, these different locations. Do we have solutions already mapped out for those? Sure, so that app actually shows. Could you, sorry, I apologize for our live stream.
Yeah, so that app actually shows every AED, not just in our school. So it shows it at Federal Way, the Federal Way Aquatic Center, any buildings around that, restaurants, all locations haven't been identified. And so at the high school level, we also have the portables that go with our athletic trainers wherever they're at.
Okay.
I'm good.
Just one question. It says annually the district will distribute the head injury information to the parents annually, or?
Through final forms, I
Final,
assume.
like
Sure, so
final-
annually, anytime a kid registers for athletics,
Right.
they would need to sign that, acknowledge that. And same thing happens with any of our facility use rentals groups as well.
Yep.
Okay.
As a parent, I love the new system where I can sign up my kids for all the sports
Yeah,
one
one
time
time.
at the beginning of the year. Thank you very much.
I'd like to just take an opportunity to thank Mr. Brian Smith and his team in athletics and activities that back up to the defibrillators and others. As districts across the state and country, I would say we're getting better about how we, make those known and visible across. But what I've noticed since he being here is systematizing these pieces so it's not a thought for us. And so I want to thank him and his team and just let the board know and acknowledge that. And Brian would tell you he's still trying to refine systems to make sure that our kids are safe, whatever athletics activities that they're in. So thank you to the team.
I might add that last year at a football game, we did save a man's life with our team, and it was our security officers that really jumped in, and having the AEDs within their vehicles, another great move. But it also taught them that they needed to carry scissors on their uniform so that they could get to through the shirts and clothing for the person. So we're always trying to get better.
Yep.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I also think about all of the middle school sports that we've added this year at the different levels, competitive, no cut, and then the intramurals. Are all of those required to go through this information
they're-
too? Are they included within this policy?
Yes.
Okay, so even our esports students will sign the,
Yes, I mean that, to be honest, that's kind of one of those borderline things, but yes, we are encouraging all of our schools to utilize final forms for any and all groups now. And so even if the middle school is doing an open gym, we have the expectation that those kids are registering and we're taking attendance on those kids as well through final forms, which automatically sends an email to the parents if the kid or child is not there. So.
okay, that makes sense, great. Thank you very much, no more questions.
Do we have any funding that's already set aside for equipment replacements or ongoing maintenance that's associated with this policy?
We have worked hand in hand with Lindy and our risk management, and anytime there's been a request or an update needed, there's great communication within our district to make that happen. So, yes, I would always have that in my budget, and as an emergency if we needed something, and knowing that teams are traveling or whatever else our needs. It could be by individual too. We might have a kid that's registered that needs that with them all the time, and so we have that budget available.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and that was, Director Son, that was part of our learning when they first started coming out, defibrillators. We knew that there was a battery life to them, and so we ended up instituting systems to make sure those are always updated. As we replaced them, obviously they had longer life, but those are things, as Mr. Smith mentioned, always learning new things about this, but definitely systematizing from a budget perspective as well.
The action plans have kind of changed focus a little bit too. We're really encouraging our kids to be a part of that, in that they have a voice and understand that their coach is more likely to drop from a heart attack than one of them. And so how do they respond?
Just as a personal note, I had a friend whose son was playing football in Kashmir in 1987, head injured. He went back out on the field because we didn't have the protocol in place that we do now, paralyzed, in a coma for 25 years. And if this had been in place, who knows if it would or would not have happened, but it probably wouldn't have, because he went and was head injured a second time in the drill. So Brian and I talked about that a little bit. I think he actually helped spur this policy on, to be honest.
That's
So
correct.
it's super
yeah.
important.
Along with Mr. Lysted, who was a Tahoma football player that went through a double concussion. And boy, that's aging me, but that was close to 20 years ago. And had some permanent damage because of that concussion.
Good to move ahead?
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Policy 2021, Library Information and Technology Programs. Let me pull that up. This policy has not been revised in 22 years. We no longer have references to a media center or the board stocking libraries. The policy has been updated to include language regarding technology, computers, and mobile devices. Information has also been added about teacher librarians' role, including facilitating the library operations, resulting in the development of a diverse, student-focused collection of materials, and providing individual support and guidance for students in finding reading material. I also wanted to note that it's crossed out in here citizens, and that was a change made by WASDA because it conveyed that a certain immigration status was necessary for individuals to ask for reconsideration of materials, and that is not true. So they changed the wording in that.
This proposal actually came from a library committee, is that correct? What?
So Director Clark, I know that my team, I think led by Dr. Corbally, worked closely with a team. I'm going to let her go ahead and share kind of who was involved in that.
Okay.
Dr. Corbally.
The policy is really reflective of what WASDA and then our district. The procedure, though, that it will come to you later was that we sat down with a group of librarians and went through the procedure that will be in alignment with this policy. So they have had significant voice in what that policy is, or the procedure is, that aligns to this policy.
Thank you for the question, though.
I'm good.
Consensus to move forward?
And maybe I'm being too picky on this one, but the idea of residents or staff members of the district, we do have many of our students that are from outside of the area and they're not actually residents. And I think of our McKinney-Bento students, and I would want their families to have just as an equal of a say.
We just made a change like this. We can sure put in there parents of or guardians of students in our district as well.
I think that seems appropriate and something that would stay in the spirit of what we're looking for and make sure that that's still fully defined.
Yeah, and I'd also add that
Other
when we,
director's opinion on that one?
It's good. I like that.
what I also add for the board's knowledge of this, when we think of Kent School District students, and we think of residents just by boundary, we also have Kent School District students that are actually, you mentioned McKinney, coming from other areas, other school district, but we also have transfers that come from other districts through the process that's allowed, right? But yeah, I just wanted to point that out, that we also have, that would be considered a Kent School District parent as well.
Yep, absolutely.
Director Margell, do you see the change up there? Is that something that,
Can you
Maybe if my eyes were a little better.
okay,
That one's getting closer, but still, but
you can make
She
it
has the
a
cursor
little
on there,
bigger?
yeah.
Does that help?
There you
Getting
go.
closer, yep, there we go.
Okay.
Yep,
Okay. Rest of the board feel good about that change? Okay. Ready to move forward?
yes. Everybody else good?
Yep.
Okay, the next one is the retirement of Policy 6023, it's bank account petty cash authorization. The newly adopted policy that we adopted in last June, it was 6020 systems of funds and accounts, and it is including the language that was in this. And we no longer have petty cash, although it's allowed. KSD does not have a petty cash account. So that's why this policy is being retired. Good, okay. Okay, policy 6216, reimbursement for goods and services, warrants and unclaimed or reissued warrants. This combines the current WASDA policy, reimbursement for goods, with the current KSD policy, unclaimed or reissued warrants. You can see the changes there. There's a strikeout in here that talks about recording warrants with the county auditor. This is only required of districts that do not issue their own warrants, and we do issue our own. So that is why the strikeout is in there.
I'm good.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
fine. Director Song, Director Farah,
No, I'm good.
you're good?
Yeah, yeah. I was just reading through.
Is there a minimum dollar amount that the majority of the board must approve all warrants?
Still no?
Yes.
All warrants, we include all warrants every month to the
Okay.
board.
Okay, we are on to 6217, electronic funds transfer. This policy authorizes the district's use of electronic methods of payment, including electronic funds transfers. When we implemented 6020 system of funds and accounts, the board approved the establishment of a new bank account with King County Treasury Operations for the purpose of remitting electronic payments to vendors. Any questions?
Is electronic fund transfer the only way we're paying vendors right now? Or is KSD also distributing like checks and, okay.
So currently, Director Song, we do currently just pay our vendors by checks, but we are beginning a new pilot program.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Are we good?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I guess it's just one other quick one. So with the electronic funds transfer, sometimes vendors may ask for the reimbursement or in addition to the processing charges if they use things like Stripe. Is there anything in our policy that, protects us from, absorbing any of those additional costs for processing using electronic funds?
So our accounting team does a fantastic job through every invoice that they receive to make sure the district is not paying for additional fees. So that's definitely the auditing officer designee, Amanda Davis. She makes sure her team is watching and monitoring that, so thank you. Great
Okay.
question.
Okay, I think we're good to move on.
Okay. This is first reading of policy 6570, property and data management. Let me get past this. Property records and inventory records will be maintained on all land, buildings, and personal property under control of the district. Property purchased with any part of federal funds will be inventoried at least every 2 years. However, KSD does an annual inventory. So we we make the requirement on our own. Capital assets was removed from this policy. It's now included in policy 6801, which we'll be talking about.
I have no questions on this. Director Song, Director Clark? Nope.
I'm
We're good?
Okay. Next is a new policy that I just mentioned. This is capital assets, theft-sensitive assets, 6801. This just gives, it defines what capital asset is and notes, again, the federal law about inventory every 2 years. We do have a policy that deals with capital assets currently. That's the 6570 we just talked about, and moving that language into 6801. The district will maintain a comprehensive capital assets record according to this policy. And again, the federally funded items need to be inventoried every 2 years, but again, we take care of that ourselves every year.
What do we do with that? We do, I'm sure we have a checklist, we look at it, some things are gone, most things are here, like, what does that look like?
So we currently run that process both for central staff and departments as well as for schools. And we send that process out to those individual teams, verifying if assets are present, missing, surplus. Then we actually then document that in our current Skyward system. And then every year, SAO does request to see a list of items that were inventoried and our small and attractive items. So it's a very long-standing practice of our district.
And just quickly, I want to ask you about the surplus you mentioned. When you do surplus, is there like, to make sure that we're environmentally being responsible to whoever we're surplusing, that they are making sure that it's not end up in places where usually it's not? Are we following? That's what I'm just asking.
Well, I can tell you that the state regulations around what school districts can do from surplus have really changed and become more stringent,
Right.
a lot more stringent, to include considerations
Right.
like that in the last 5 to 10 years. Even in the time I've been with the district, it used to be much easier
So you
to
can
sell
just-
our surplus.
Right.
Now it's much more heavily regulated by the state. I wouldn't be able to tick off for you exactly what they preclude and don't preclude in terms of who can buy surplus, but I know that it has been a point of attention for the state. And has had some side effects, because it's harder now for public entities, not just school districts, but
Right.
municipalities and counties, to be able to sell their surplus. And it can pile up in cases.
Other questions? Okay, move on to the next one. This policy is new. It's policy 4200, parent access, visitors, and safe and orderly learning environment. We added the visitors portion that we retired from 4311 into this policy. This policy is a result of RCW 28A 605020 that assures parents access to their child's classroom and school-sponsored activities for purposes of observing class procedure, teaching material, and class conduct. However, the revisions also stipulate that such observation must not disrupt the classroom or learning activity. We talk a lot about visitors, how the visitors will sign in, disruption of school operations. But again, it's based on the RCW. Any questions?
And just to make sure I understand, if a parent is volunteering in the school, non-one-on-one, so like party, whatever, Valentine's Day party that they're all there for, whatever it is, that does not require VIPs. That just requires sign-in.
I think I'll let Mr. Kovich answer that one, as he's been working closely with NUTVIPS and also that process, so.
Yes, thank you. It does not require VIPs for that type of a situation. Yes, requires sign-in. Just like anyone, we want to make sure people are in that building. If emergencies arise, anything, you can get a good, accurate count. And they're part of whatever group and whatever thing that they're doing there. So yes, just sign in.
Okay, but if you're going to be a chaperone and potentially taking a small group or larger group of students at the zoo or whatever like that, then requires VIPs and the whole questionnaire.
It does require VIPs, which is an annual process. This gets reviewed each year. So if you have students next year, you're going to go through the VIPs process. You sign up for those events. You're on a list. And so, yes, it goes through that whole vetting process in VIPs.
Okay, and then this policy is specifically for the first part that I talked about, just going into the school, the non-VIPs required.
That is correct.
And I don't see it in here, but just confirming that there is no, it doesn't look like that there's a time. We don't restrict how often the parent can come in or how long they can spend there or anything in that, or is that part of the procedure or?
There is mention in procedure. It does talk about that. But the disruption, knowing in advance, coming into that classroom setting, you can't just be surprised, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, so in the procedure, we will define what class disrupt means.
That is correct.
Okay. I guess the only thing that I'm interested in seeing is on the procedure about this is to be in the spirit of that we welcome and encourage that it's not arduous what our parents are required to do, such as a month's notice or something of that respect. And so I'm just interested in seeing what that looks like within our procedures.
Very good. Yes.
I have a quick question. I've seen this happen in other schools, and I'm not sure if there are policies around it, but I know it's caused some communication. But lately there's been an increase, not just in Washington, but just all over, with families, caregivers, friends wanting to Zoom in and FaceTime students while they're in class to kind of observe and monitor. And so I've seen some classrooms outside of this district where a kid will FaceTime their parent, kind of set it up behind them so the parents can watch. Is this the appropriate policy where we would put anything about technology and virtual visits, I guess, that might also impact the classroom?
Yeah,
That
I would say this is really around safety, and I know the connection you're making here. Safety and visitors that are not known to us and the process for that, and obviously the procedure aligning with that. I believe that would be more around the acceptable use policy of technology, and however, it could also disrupt the educational environment potentially, but I think, if I understand your question correctly, that is beyond Zoom. I think our virtual academy potentially and others, but yeah, that's what I would say, but I open that up to Dr. Behringer.
It might be an opportunity underneath the parent access piece of this to define that means physically in the space versus virtually in the space, accessing the classroom. Might be an opportunity to define it there, so we're a little bit more clear, so we won't have to worry about that piece.
Okay.
Actually, I'm glad that Mr. Smith is here. Parents are assured access to their child's classroom as well as school-sponsored activities. Does that also include all sporting activities and practices?
Yes. I think just like.
Could you use the microphone? I apologize.
I think just like with the classroom, I think it would be something that we would want to know when the parents are coming in, not because of any issue besides we want to protect all of our kids that are in that facility. We don't know who's coming in and what problems they're bringing in with them. And so, of course, we want parents to be involved, but I think it needs to be proactive in that they're reaching out and asking if they can come in and watch that practice.
that might be something that we'd want to specify within
yeah.
here. But I do, to your point, I would take huge issue if I had a parent recording my kid without me knowing, and I'm sure that many of our parents would too. So it's an interesting topic. I hadn't even considered somebody doing that, and so I thank you, Director Song, for bringing that up. But because it very much specifies in here classroom, 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 maybe some language around
Other activities.
or other activities and its location, to be broad enough.
I know that for things like sporting events, as far as the events, we call it out, I believe, in the procedure, or coming in for conferences, that type of thing. Or if the parent's known to the school themselves, they have the leeway to just let the parent go to the classroom to work. So there are those things.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Smith, so for example, I'm just trying to think, school activity, for example, if my child is, has a play, and I'm coming with my child, do I have to notify ahead of time, or I just?
So when it,
Because I don't
when it
remember.
becomes public and,
Yeah.
and we're inviting that audience, then
Right.
of course, we wouldn't have that need. I think when we're in a practice situation, I think it's always great to communicate with the coaches.
Right.
We don't always know the issues that one child might have with another, or one family with another, and we've had situations arise at events that we certainly don't want to have happen in a practice where we don't have security, we don't have administration around to
Do it.
diffuse that situation.
So basically, it's practice, not the actual game or
Agreed.
during the play or something.
And then another question, I don't know if it's appropriate for this policy or if this exists somewhere else, but just looking at the language, and it's a niche population, but when we think about kids who might be under state custody or have an alternative guardianship placement that they're currently going through, where do we have in our policy that outlines kind of the legal risks or policies around visitation? So like say a child's removed or there's like a protection order where dad can't be there. Is there anything that I guess the school would have identified knowledge of this? So we're making sure that those aren't crossed or?
That's a great question, because that, our schools and our safety services offices often advises on those. And so, Mr. Kovich, if you'd like to talk a little bit about either the parenting plans that may have restrictions to them, et cetera.
Correct. So we first have to be notified, obviously, from the parents to bring that in, and then that gets noted within the student profile, so that there's a list of people that are already on what we typically call like the locator of, here's this parent, a brother, an aunt, an uncle, they all are there that can pick up, and then there's also notes and indicators within these parenting plans. That's on file, and then all of those have to be vetted by law enforcement to see if they are actually accurate or not. If we ever have conflict in the future, that's typically what happens. So there are locations within the student profile that does note all that.
Okay. And then are there measures in place to kind of remedy more, I guess, acute situations? Like say a kid was just removed from placement, they're now with uncle and we had no idea. And uncle's like, hey, I just got this kid yesterday. I'm here to pick him up because they're going through stuff. What is that process, or what does that family member have to go through in order to actually come into the school now and visit the students?
Some of that information is beyond my knowledge. I would have to answer that. I know that Student and Family Support gets a lot of information regarding parents and other people who are guardians. I have not really interacted in that exact situation.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
I definitely can. I'd like to have Mr. Heath to come up and just share, but that does occur. And so that locator car that Mr. Kovich talked about, it is what we know ahead of time, right? Or whatever's updated, because sometimes those plans have expirations from the court. So we have to be aware of them. But I think what your situation, what if that just occurred and now they're with someone else? You know, how we handle that. So, Mr. Heath.
Absolutely. You know, it's great when official channels happen, and you know, we have a good relationship with DSHS, and we have a specific person in the Student and Family Support Services that actually is a liaison regarding students in foster care, and so a lot of times we get notified through official channels if it is official. Sometimes we just hear from family members. It's like, well, so-and-so's in the hospital, or da-da-da. First off, we check, and hopefully that person is already on the locator cards as a contact that we have in the system, and that makes it easiest there. Sometimes that's not, and so the schools try to do as much checking as they can in order to try to determine, you know, should they be here. Others, you know, reaching out to people that are on the contact list, trying to get some kind of clarification that is the situation. The reality is sometimes we can't find any. However, that becomes on our radar big time right there in terms of trying to continue to get that confirmation. However, we don't want to like send the kid home that day and say, well, you can't stay here because you're not registered, because they're safer in our, we know where they are. So a lot of times it follows through official processes, but every once in a while we have to kind of problem solve as we go along.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, we will oftentimes, well, on the locator card, there are emergency contacts and backups, and those are up to the parents to say who that is. A lot of times they can give us information that you know, we didn't know, but they'll call us. One thing about our community is they're really good about letting our school office, principals, et cetera, teachers in some cases know, you know, some certain circumstances, then that mobilizes us to take a look at that card if something's just not looking right. So, but triangulate our efforts.
Okay.
Just to let you know how tight things can be in that situation, having been at Kent Meridian for 14 years, we run into a lot of parents who are right there on the locator card that came in without an ID. We have to verify their identification. Yeah. It's like, well, I'm the mother of so-and-so. Like, well, I believe you, but do you have your ID? I don't have my ID. Okay. Well, we've had situations that they've had to actually go all the way back home, get their ID, and then come back, which was not really a comfortable conversation in those spaces. But that's how seriously we should be taking every single instance when an adult comes in to pick up a kid. Their name needs to be on the locator card, and we need to identify them through identification. So it's a pretty tight ship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and I'm aware these other policies do exist. I'm just wondering with this one, because this language just sounds very loose, and so my curiosity was more, how does this connect with some of the other, I guess, collateral policies that might also impact this one? Okay, thank you.
Great questions.
So if we were to add practice or other activities in there and also mention physically, being there physically, is that enough of a change to move this on that we could present it to you for approval, or would you like to bring it back for another reading?
I in my notes just added 2 little words on there, and I just did, instead of class, I said /activity. I think because it makes it broader, I'm fine with moving it on to a next reading and not saying that this has to.
Move it on for approval.
Move it on for approval, my apologies, yes,
Yeah.
sorry.
Okay,
Yeah, I'm okay with those.
Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
great.
Great conversation.
Great
Thank you.
point, though.
Okay, next one is 4210, regulation of dangerous weapons on school premises. The revisions clarify that a person with a concealed weapons permit may carry a weapon onto school property when picking up or dropping off students, or when attending a board meeting off campus or held at district-owned or leased property. This aligns with House Bill 1630, which is now incorporated into RCW 941-230. And if you have any questions, I'll defer to Mr. Kovich.
I do have to say I learned more about dangerous weapons from reading this than I've ever in my life known that they even existed. But in doing so, I just have to answer, why does it matter if a knife blade is like, comes out with a mechanism compared to just a knife blade that never does?
Lots of good questions. There's a lot of words on here when it comes to the definition of weapons. What is that? But for sure, okay. So being spring-loaded or mechanical, that has been defined as basically, it is more dangerous because of its mechanism. I don't really know. I think any knife can be if used, but that's what was defined by the state. So like the switchblade.
Totally get it. I'm thinking of, you know, those guys that always have everything in their, like, wonder tool, right? And they have their pocket knife. And the knife is like this long.
Leatherman?
Like, I'm trying to figure out with that one, how that could be any more dangerous than the butcher knife.
Unfortunately, I don't have the reasoning on why the state decided to make that part of the definition, the size piece. I know that a 3-inch knife was part of a piece that if it's this big, it needs to be a certain type of a crime. I don't understand why they have that, but that's just the list on how it is done from the state.
So what I'm hearing is it's not, the question's not why, but this is what is defined by the state as a dangerous weapon, and we're adopting a policy of state-defined.
Correct.
In their wisdom.
Correct.
Okay.
And I'd also say in cases where this has come up, and Mr. Kovich can attest to this, is that each situation is really looked at separately, because oftentimes there are, you know, sharp, blunt, you know, the length of these become, so we do that extra effort to really learn what the situation was, and where did that come from, and all those pieces to assess then the intent around that, because sometimes students will bring these and not even know that these are illegal to have on campus, much less share them or show them. So, Mr. Kovich.
Correct. The mere possession of some of these items is then not allowed, but again, it's the circumstances in how that came about. Aggravating circumstances when you start to look at the discipline and how you look at that, or a criminal offense based on the type. So possession of a Swiss Army knife in a book bag because I'm in Boy Scouts and I had this for the weekend and I reached down to get my pencil and a teacher saw it in there, and there's no intent in that. There was nothing menacing. There was anything like that. That's typically like a lot of education done. It's like, okay, versus one being presented and threatened, and so all of those factors are looked at that, and so it's
So it's not prescriptive of what we have to do. It is
correct.
Very, okay, I appreciate
Correct.
that.
Just clarification, how does this get around the open carry law? Like, if I wanted to bring in a registered firearm into this room, how does that work?
So in the piece with the concealed carry piece, you are allowed to, in this recommended policy and with the law, you are allowed to pick up your child as an exemption, have a concealed handgun permit, be on school grounds, and then pick up your child. It's not meant to be where you go to a play, where you would be at another event, those types of things, unless it is sanctioned by the school. So a firearms educational program, that would be an example where it would be okay, based on the exemptions that are in here to do that. You would not be able to open carry a rifle and walk into a school setting. That you could not do that based on this. Only those small little pieces about storage of the firearm, and then also the concealed carry during those small times, which is the pickup, like I said in here, and I think it's outlined.
Yep.
On this.
It's up on the screen.
Okay, and then the other one I had was, I don't remember seeing it on this list when I reviewed it, but 3D printing is becoming very popular. Is there any language around filaments as also being a material that could technically be put on this list?
Plastics is listed.
Plastics?
Plastics
Just
is-
because, I'm just thinking like the very nuanced legal language around it, since some filaments do have other materials in addition to plastics.
I remember it being really open.
Yeah, and I do know like at the end there was that catch-all of like anything else not on this list. That's
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
Anything that can be used as a weapon, if used as a weapon, then could be in a violation. Or, yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I was just curious because it was pretty specific with other materials and.
Yeah.
I can say we are aware of the 3D printing and the ghost gun type idea, and we did educate ourselves within safety services regarding that and what does that look like. And when it comes to those devices and the materials, they're very controlled at the school. The programming, I've been told, it might have changed within the last year or so, but I've been told there are things in advance that are noted in programs, and so it's very controlled in those settings. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Good. The next one's the 4311 that we are proposing to retire, and I'm assuming that the board is good with that. That was the visitors that we moved into 4200. Dr. Margell?
Oh,
I'm
yes.
sorry, President Margell.
Yeah, sorry.
It looked like you had a question on that?
No.
No? Okay. So now to the new 4311. School Safety and Security Services Program. It means a school safety and security staff means a school resource officer, a school security officer, a campus security officer, or any other commissioned or non-commissioned employee or contractor whose primary job duty is to provide safety or security services for a public school. Any questions?
I'm good.
You good?
Nope.
Andy? Great, we're good.
Good, okay. Next is 6511, staff safety. There are minimal changes to this policy with the exception of adding information that having a first aid station or a well-marked first aid kit if there are more than 50 employees. Additionally, I found out that our school nurses hold a near monthly first aid course. They've averaged 21 people per class this school year.
I'm good.
50 makes me think.
Yeah.
You know, having visited iGrad today, they might not have had 50 people every day at all. That seems like a really high number. I mean, I know that 50 is used a lot in state language and in federal language for things, but
And I believe what the language was in the RCW.
yep.
But I think, and I'm not positive, all of our schools have well-marked first aid kits. Whether there's 20 or 50 or 450.
I mean, I would feel more comfortable if all like designated KSD schools
Just have it.
will have a well-marked first aid station or well-marked first aid kit.
Anybody else?
That's good.
Yeah, I'd ask Mr. Smith, I know that first aid kits are plentiful in our activities and athletics areas. We think about first aid kits also in schools. You know, the more, the better access. And so your thoughts on this piece is eliminating the 50 and just having it
Because it's
at all
also 50
places.
employees, not
Yeah.
50 kids.
I'm sorry, yes, 50 employees.
Right.
So my response to Israel, and go back to my science teacher days, every science teacher has a first aid kit as well, just because of labs.
Yeah.
And so around the school, I'm thinking of Canyon Ridge and the new facility there, and their eye wash station and their first aid stations right there. And so that's kind of central, but also, obviously we have main office always will have one as well in every school that I've been in. And then in the PE department, PE teachers also have them in their offices. And then, of course, every one of our athletic programs has a first aid kit that travels with that team.
So at practice, when they're off-site or they're on a soccer field or
They would be checked out to the coach.
with every practice, not just every, yep,
It should be, yes.
okay. I would propose that we would put
Yeah,
this
do it
in,
all,
just, it sounds like we already do, but let's just have it in our policy, that, especially that
Yeah, I agree.
50 employees seems.
No,
Okay.
thank you, that's a good point.
And just to add to that, recently adopted the bleeding control stations from King County to be put in all of our facilities. We already have those established in every one of our buildings already now. So that is an additional one that is already out there anyway, including Kent Valley Early Learning Center is an addition there. And so that just adds to that, just so you know, there's more equipment out there, so.
Do we also have any first aid on our buses?
Yes.
Yes, every,
If I get to answer something today. We didn't forget.
every bus is required to have a first aid kit on board with a fire extinguisher as well.
Okay. Again, I think that
That's, yeah.
should be a good, within our policy. We do it already. It's good to have it.
So adding that language in,
I guess on that topic too, if we ever charter any buses or any other vehicle for transport, do we have any language in these policies that say that those additional vehicles either have to have it or we have to provide it?
Hopefully that'd be traveling with the team, right?
Yeah, but if we like rent
But no,
a
it's a
bus or
good point, but
something-
hopefully it
Oh,
would
yeah.
be doubled.
Yeah.
So a charter company that, like First Student, their school bus, they will have one because they're required to. Private charter companies may not have that. So that is a gap that could exist if a field trip was on a charter bus. If it's an athletic trip, they'll probably have the gear bag with the first aid kit. So there could be a gap there.
Yeah, I'm thinking of like a lot of our other clubs, right? Like our drama, chess, like ones that may not carry those. Can we also include into the policy that any kind of school sanctioned travel, if there's nothing like in the vehicle, that there's a district sponsored kit that goes with, say, the lead or the teacher or whoever the adult is that's supervising it?
Yeah, I appreciate that because, we do use charter sometimes where there's not enough transportation for athletics, as example, or, buses are just not available, that we're going to a play in Seattle, and rather to leave it to chance of that, that to put it in, to make sure that not only we carry, but school sanctioned activities. I like that language.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of the liability
Yeah,
if
no.
something were to happen.
Yeah,
At least we have one with us.
yeah.
I mean, choir just went to Disneyland. They were on an airplane, which I assumed have it, but
Yes. Yeah.
then they're on charter buses and things like that. And if something happened while someone's singing,
Yeah.
yep. Okay.
so I'm curious, would the teacher be the one responsible for carrying it with them? Or, because I'm not sure how we could, how we're checking with a California charter after they come off the bus. How would we be
Maybe the
wording that?
chaperones.
Yeah. can we just say
Chaperones
like
would
a
be required?
designated-
Yeah.
Yeah, designated leader, someone who's
Yeah.
Yeah.
leading the kids and the whole play.
As long as there's one KSD designated adult
Right.
who knows how to get one or has one.
Yeah.
And I think that that's appropriate language too, that in close proximity. I mean, if they're at KCAC has to have one. Sorry, the Aquatic Center in Federal Way, they have one for sure.
So you may not necessarily have to have one on the transport, but knowing,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, I'll put some language together. We'll bring it forward for approval, and if you're not happy with it, we can bring it back for another reading. Is
Thank
that
you, Ms.
fine?
Holly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, 6895. We'll open here. Pesticide notification, posting, and record keeping. It's pretty straightforward. You've probably seen flyers on the doors when you've come into some buildings notifying of some spraying.
I'm good.
Yeah.
Good?
We're good.
$6605, student safety, walking, biking, riding buses, and school patrol. As I mentioned at the beginning, we just updated this policy in October, but it only added school patrol in. So we're bringing it back with this other language that talks about additional changes about bus safety and safe routes to school plan, which had been added.
I do have a question on this one. When a parent feels that the designated, well, I have a couple different questions that come, that the route is not safe for their student to walk on. Major thoroughfares, no sidewalks, no crosswalks appropriately, those type of things. And when, this is probably a second question, we have a designated walk distance, but that distance is unsafe, and so they have to, or not passable, and so they have to do something that takes them outside. What, do we have a process for parents to say, okay, no, now, for my kid to walk safely, it takes 2 miles. Can we get bus transportation? Could you talk through that a little bit for me?
Yeah, when a parent brings a concern like that together, what we do is we organize a walk with the parent, and we have different people involved in that based on the school. Myself, some of the people from my transportation team, safety services, whatever jurisdiction for the roadway, whether it's City of Kent or King County, City of Covington, there's traffic engineers that will assist us on that walk. We have the parents. Different groups have been coordinated over the years to assess those situations, and some adjustments have been made. Yeah.
Larger question, and this I know was brought up with Mill Creek, is just the area surrounding the school can sometimes have unsavory situations happening, and how is that taken in light of a safe walk?
Yeah, and I think that just most recently happened, and Mr. Finney's sitting right here as an audience member, that similar plan as what Justin just talked about. The team would include in that case was Kent Police, or someone that can help us with cases that might have been occurring. In this case, it was a parent that let us know about the unsafe conditions in that. So Tim can probably share a little bit more about how that would be incorporated into the process that Justin just shared. So Tim.
So when parents have these concerns and the example given, we went out ongoing into the area, and we took some of our safety patrol officers mobile and started to patrol during those times, trying to survey, observe. We also monitor Kent Police radio for other things occurring nearby. In all schools we do this to try and address putting ourselves and our school resource officers as our partnership with Kent into those locations to try and do an emphasis. Sometimes we've walked it. This situation for 2 straight weeks I drove in the AM trying to look and see and be aware of that. I got out a couple times myself to some of the citizens in some of those areas and just hung out just as the kids were walking by, just to be safe. Some of the kids, they're coming up and asking me, oh, what are you doing? And they would share their stories. And so that helps me gain more information, and then we share it with our officers and our teams. I've been in some neighborhoods I've never been before in that situation. It's good to get out and see that perspective when we do that. But we try and kind of get boots on the ground, be seeing our vehicles are marked. That just adds another set of eyes and people and a deterrent also when we drive the neighborhoods that the kids walk. So we tried to get some of that, use some of that information and share that with the city just so law enforcement can address some of the problems if we happen to see it too.
I have a suggestion. So for this list right here, for the considerations that the committee will take, can we also include some language around consideration for disabilities? Because some students may not be able to have the same accessibility to those routes. Hard of hearing, hard of sight, mobility.
We have other provisions for students with disabilities, 504 accommodations. We've got IEPs with transportation, specialized transportation written into their IEPs. And so there are other ways that students are receiving transportation if they have disabilities.
Okay, does that only apply if the students have an IEP or 504? What if there's a student that does have one, but that's not that greatly impacts their education, but does impact some of their more accessibilities?
Yeah, it has to be currently in their IEP or a 504 accommodation, yeah.
Yeah, so I guess my question is more so targeting that population that may not have one. I've come across many students who don't have IEPs and 504s, but do have existing disabilities.
Yeah, we have, when you were just saying that, situations where we have, like a recent injury to a student who now is on crutches, just as an example. That might be something that, you know, as I think about that, some language my team can think about, because there are situations where they're not, you know, diagnosed like on a 504 or on IEP, but are temporary due to surgery, for example, or other. So,
and
yeah.
I know geography and there are a lot of barriers and challenges to ensuring that, but as long as we can provide to families that this was considered, and maybe giving them a reason or two of why this route was chosen and why there isn't an alternative, I think would at least go a long way with the community.
Yeah, I think about experiences that I've had as a building principal over the years that when the cases that come up like I just mentioned, those are ones that I receive a phone call from the parent or a teacher receives the information that, you know, Andy's going to go through X. It's going to be about 3 weeks before and then we come together. So maybe the language can be something around that. So I'm looking over to my team. So certainly we'll do the same on this one with some language to help with that.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to also bring up an issue that a community member brought to me. They live right across the street from Merrill Meadows Park, and their kid goes to KM. Especially in the wintertime, it's dark, and school starts at 7 o'clock. They're afraid to...
7:35.
7, okay, all right.
7's early.
All right, 7:30, all right. But it's still dark. I just want to kind of brainstorm a parent who wants to send their kid out to walk from Merrill Meadows Park across the street from there to KM. How can we make sure that area in the morning, at least we have some activity security-wise, and also find a way to kind of accommodate that parent not to feel uncomfortable, because sometimes they told me that most of the time they have to drive their child because they don't, or child is also taking after-school activity, and it gets dark at 4 o'clock. So they want to also make sure that they pick them up. So I'm just trying to figure out how we can, let's figure out how we can put some kind of language in our policy to kind of make that parent feel comfortable that we're paying attention to their situation.
Yeah, I think when I think about, no, I appreciate that. I think about the partnership with our parents that is so critical, or anybody, a community member that may see a situation, in this case it's darkness, high traffic area. How can we, in the language, you know, note those different types of variables that exist out there? Because I also think about it as not just darkness, sometimes it's traffic.
Right.
That may be at a point where it's high speeds, might we say, at certain times. We do have that, systems in place there to be able to say, hey, would you have our safety resource officers that well spend time in a certain intersection, right?
At least that would.
Exactly. So we do have that. Mr. Kovich, you speak to that. And then Mr. Dennison, talk a little bit about potential language that, because I know you get phone calls, your team gets phone calls on potentially hazardous situations that might be due to either, not being able to see traffic, not see our walkers. So Mr. Kovich first, and then Mr. Dennison.
That is a very difficult thing to have it for all.
Right.
The way you describe that, that is, our 72 plus square miles, all of the variables, all of the walking routes, all of this. And we have 3 patrol officers. Okay. So when we are aware of these situations, we try to address them and put that emphasis into those areas. But it's not a constant because we can't be everywhere. But we try to address that, try to educate, try and work with all these different options that parents at the beginning of the year, everybody wants to drive their kid. They start, there's a high volume, and then everyone starts to find their groups, they find their carpools, they find their friends, and they start to make those adjustments. We try to recommend as many options as possible, and back to the one you described and the location you described. That's a pretty short walk to a school from the one you described there. Very busy road when you get out in one of those locations, but lots of businesses, a very well-established sidewalk, better than others. But we do try and assist when we find that need. We try and expand and do that emphasis. But no, we can't do it for all. That is a difficult thing given the size, but we try to address it in kind of that fashion. But with the walking route discussion and assessing those, lighting, other things, they're all brought up during that walk that we do, if that comes up.
Yeah, I have a question about that. It says that the district will conduct a walking and biking audit within the 1 mile radius of the school. However, we require high school students to walk up to 1.75 miles, I believe.
So the 1 mile is a funding piece for the state. I think that language is that the language in the WAC for the 1 mile?
Pursuant to, yeah.
Yeah, that's in the WAC. But we have our distances greater than that, and we do create our walk routes, encompassing what our district policy distances are. So
It feels like the language needs to be updated to state that, because it sounds like right now we're only going to walk the 1 mile. And sorry, that other's 0.75, you're out of luck.
yes, that sounds
So
like
I've highlighted that. We can make those changes.
Okay, thank you. And I was interested in the language here. There's 2 places. That the plan will recommend the best routes for students walking to and from. Do we have that for, that just seems impossible. That for every student and every drop-off and every house that they're going to, we have.
So there's waypoints. In a neighborhood, you get to, the next, it's like within reason. We don't have a dot from every single resident, but it's close to, within a couple blocks, you're connecting to a road that connects you to another road. And we have maps like that outlining it.
And I also, the board recognizes the need to assist and aid members of the student body in the safe and proper crossing of streets, highways, and roads that are adjacent to the school. How do we do that?
Well, I can give you, as a former principal, safety, our students that participate in our patrol. We do we have done patrol. Mr. Kovich, I'm looking to you. I'm sure you've done some of these yourself, but where they do conduct those at the different schools, so
So is that just then at the elementary school?
that's what I was getting.
Correct. I think there is only one middle school that has a designated crossing guard at a specific intersection. That is a higher level training based on the traffic control aspect of that one site. Everything else is based on the, Washington State has a guide for all principals to follow for a student-based school patrol program and AAA, and that's funneled down from those two agencies. And Safety Services helps assist in finding that information, along with there are also some grants for equipment. But it is all elementary based for the school patrol piece of that. Adults drive and oversee it, and there are only a few schools that actually use the students themselves doing it versus the adults are doing the school patrol itself. Yeah.
What about for Running Start? Is that up to the community colleges at that point? I'm just thinking about accountability. If somebody reads this and they're like, well, my child's at Running Start and you didn't give us a route, will this impact KSD at all?
So just to understand the question, so Running Start, you're thinking about a full-time Running Start person would not be.
Or even part-time, like if
Well,
they're
I was going to say,
yeah.
we do have part-time, and so they're considered whether they're part-time or not.
It's their choice.
Yeah,
But
it's
for
their
their
choice.
time outside of the
Yeah.
district.
It's their choice to
Yeah.
Okay.
restart, so, yeah.
Because that would be a lot of work to also map all of those. I'm just wondering,
Yeah.
are there also protections in here for KSD in case somebody has a grievance about that? About, well, what about people who want to walk to their community college, or I guess Evergreen's the closest one.
I've never encountered that.
Okay.
Yeah, once students choose to be either a full-time or a part-time Running Start student and their FTE in dollars goes to that school, we're not obligated to do a walking route or provide transportation to that particular institution. So we're obligated to, take care of our students that are within the organization here.
Yeah.
But once they make the choice, because it is a choice to go to community college or college outside of the boundaries, then they have to provide their own transportation and or walking routes.
Is there anything that references that, though, that we can deliver to them if anybody tries to challenge it?
I don't know.
Or do we just kind of say, hey, it's your fault?
Are you aware of any that we could
No,
potentially?
I'm not. I'm just,
Because we're
again,
not, so.
thinking of reducing liability for
Yeah.
the district.
No, I think as far as liability, we are covered by our carrier on, a number of different areas, but I think that would be one of them.
Okay.
But I think the question here for this policy really is around, the walking routes back to, I want to make sure we circle back to answer the question. President Margell, you had one was around the safety piece when we know of situation that arises. I think we answered that one. I thought you had another one about the radius, and I think we answered that as well.
We're going to change the language.
policy. Yeah,
Yeah.
to match our,
Perfect, great. Just
Right.
want to make sure we got
Yes.
that.
And my understanding, Mr. Dennison, I could be wrong, but you were working on uploading the walk routes. It's a goal to have those uploaded at some point so
To the
that people can
website.
see them online.
Right.
Okay.
And I just wanted to point out, it says routinely, updated. That's kind of vague. In our policy, can we, or procedure somewhere define what routinely means?
Yeah.
Where are you looking, Director
Oh,
Farrell?
Definitely.
Sorry.
Just look at the paragraph after number 8. After number 8.
Okay.
Yeah, right there, it says superintendent and designee will receive.
So I'll say that our practice has been that as neighborhoods get built,
Right.
which is, things have happened like that, there's been roadway improvements, whether it's roundabouts or traffic circles, signals that have gone in. We have made adjustments to those maps to reflect that.
And that is in the procedure, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Instead of, routinely I can see, because we can
Right.
make it, you know, policy will cover, you know, big,
Yeah, it's,
in radius, but
Right.
in the procedure, it will specify all
Right.
those.
We'll make sure we define it.
We
yeah,
define it, what
yeah,
that means, yeah.
Because I forgot to mention that we do, as you know, construction
Right,
is
right.
happening all around us.
And
And I think about some of the walking routes that we talked about are obsolete sometimes if they've, you know, completely changed a road or a cul-de-sac, or sidewalks are added too.
Or open the new route
Right, exactly, so,
towards, for example, KM.
yeah, that's a good example. Right. So, yeah, definitely we'll
Right.
make sure we align the procedure with that wording. Good conversation.
Anything else?
Am I coming through? Question was asked about obligations to provide transportation to Running Start students. So the statewide regulatory FAQ clarifies that school districts are not obligated to provide transportation to Running Start unless the student has an IEP that specifies the need for, specifically for transportation. Otherwise, districts are exempt from that requirement.
Okay, perfect.
And that would be
And,
written in the IEP.
There are a lot of people who ask for those very
Yeah.
specific things, and if you can't produce a policy,
Yeah.
then kind of stuck. Thank you.
You bet.
President Margell?
Oh, I'm fine. Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. In the same vein, 6600 transportation notes the provision of transportation for eligible students, which is something we talked about in the last policy, and discusses emergency routes and schedules.
I do remember last year this coming to light, and I remember looking at the numbers. I think Dr. Behringer provided this, and Kent was an outlier. That by far had some of the longest, and more than, I would say it's significant more than other districts. And one of the things that I remember being left with is, you know, the state funding happened at a certain distance, and so ours were so much longer. And is there anything that we could do to be able to reduce that for some of our students? And I'd just be interested if we could talk about that a little bit, and what's the outcome of it?
yes. So we understand the desire to get our walk routes lowered to a mile from what they are currently. Moving it to a mile would increase student eligibility on school buses by about 3,000 students would be eligible for transportation that are not currently eligible. So, and of the 3,000, you know, not every one of them are going to ride a bus, but say 2,500 want to ride the bus. We'll have to put in a certain number of routes to accomplish that, which requires a certain number of staffing. So if we want to get to the point of 1 mile, I think we need to phase it in to set ourselves up to be able to succeed and successfully staff the positions that would be required to reduce the walk routes. And so it may take 3 to 5 years to do that by taking incremental steps to get us to 1 mile. And we could decide on a priority. Do we want to prioritize elementary first? Realizing though that elementary, middle, and high school, like the routes, they all do, you know, a piece of each of those schools because of the various bell times. We've got staggered bell times that allow us to be as efficient as possible. So when it comes to staffing, I can share that this year we have hired and trained 19 new drivers this school year. We have had 15 leave us through attrition. So we're constantly chasing the number to stay above water. So we need to give ourselves realistic goals for staffing so that we can can get to 1 mile. I think we can. It's just going to take us some time to get there.
Sorry to be so pointed, but the board made that desire last year. What have we done this year to get closer to that?
So hiring, I mean, we've hired and trained 19 people.
No, I
Yeah,
absolutely
yeah.
understand that, but
Yeah.
what have we done? Have we, you said the incrementals can take 3 to 5 years. Have we gone to at least year 1?
We have not yet. No.
Okay.
I just have a quick question for clarification. I didn't have a chance to read the RCW, but what specifically are we referencing in the private school students to ride buses RCW? This is just for my own curiosity.
That was a recommendation from WASDA, I believe.
I'm sorry.
The private school piece that's added into there?
Yes, that was a WASDA recommendation.
Yeah, I do know, Director Song, that under Title I, if the student qualifies for that service, for example, that we are as districts required, not just Kent, but all districts required to make sure that actually we reach out to the different private schools. And that can come with other kinds of resources. And so I know that, I'm sure Mr. Heath is still here, but our Student Family Support Services team does meet regularly with private schools. So sometimes those needs pop up because we don't know about them unless we are constantly reaching out. But we do that regularly, I know, in Kent. That probably is where that WAC is, or was coming from that.
Okay.
Is because you were serving students that are private school under the federal mandates or guidance, then that includes transportation.
If I could just interrupt for a second, Director Cook is online now, so just so you know.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Did that help?
I was
Yeah.
curious.
No, when you brought that up, I thought, well, I do know we do that. But there are times that districts have not done the consultations, and we're required to do that. They are our kids regardless if they're attending a private school or not, and if they qualify.
And do we get the full funding for them?
You can get the funding that's required under federal or state because of state bilingual resources and services, so.
Okay.
So, Mr. Dens, can you explain, is there like a limitation of, let's say you said 19, what about 30? Was there a limitation, the number of people but that's all you could find, or?
Yes, our job posting is open and ongoing, and we are constantly calling and setting up interviews with, potential bus drivers. It's a full-time job for somebody. That one of our staff members works on that full-time. So it's not a lack of desire or trying on the hiring piece. It's lack of interested candidates. Yeah.
I know staffing is tough. Is there any possibility of like an on-call bus drive? When I'm looking at hiring, even just for myself, I'm noticing I'm getting more hits with people who just want to do like on-call or like smaller part-time roles, like a 0.2, 0.4. So with our bus drivers, I'm ignorant in this world. Are they all only full-time, or do we have other options just to get more drivers?
There's regular status and there's substitute status. And so a regular status driver works every school day and have a calendar, and then a substitute bus driver can basically give us their availability, their limited schedule. A lot of them are retired bus drivers who still want to be involved somewhat, but they don't want to work every day.
Okay, so they would send you ahead of time, like in June, I'll work these days.
Yes.
If you need somebody.
They do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think this issue of lack of bus drivers is not unique to only us. It is a nationwide.
Yeah.
And I say this not because I know that your team wants to do it, but the frustration from parents for after-school activities, your kid's been training, and then suddenly you're like, and there's no bus. And that it happens. And we've had to scramble to get kids to activities. And I know it's not because we want that to happen, hear me on that one, but it is hard when there's not enough bus drivers.
Yeah. And I'll echo that sentiment, Vice President Farah, that there is a neighboring district that actually contracts out that can't fulfill their contracts for the same reasons we're talking here. And that's a different way to look at it. I was thinking about Mr. Smith, and with the activities piece is always a challenge to, you know, first looking at our own bus drivers, because they also have contracts, correct, Mr. Dennison, that in terms of the jobs that come up that need to go to certain bus drivers. And then eventually, sometimes there are just not enough drivers or not enough buses. Then we charter, right, to activities, which can get expensive. But that is an ongoing type of thing, especially when we're in, you know, maybe beyond a certain time of a season, whether it's regionals or state. That's also can be a challenge. But our team does a great job. I mean, is there room to improve? Absolutely, always. I look at the 15 attrition and 19, that's 4. Let's set our goal to more and keep you know, moving ahead and trying to increase that every year.
There's something to consider when you think about our Teamsters who are our drivers as far as their association and again, very dedicated. But as Justin said, it is not uncommon year to year to hire almost as many as you lose through attrition, you know, regardless of the compensation package or the bargaining that's been happening and things like that, and the support of the association and whatnot. And we also have to take into consideration that, one, bus drivers are not a full 8-hour-a-day, 40-hour work week job. So that's different. So there are people out there that may want to be a bus driver, but then realize, oh, it's only a 32-hour-a-week job, or it's 35, or it's 28, depending on their routes and their times and things like that. So that's something to consider. 2, if you don't have a CDL coming in, you've got to go through a period of training and studying and then testing and then passing the test. And so Justin might hire 19 drivers. They might have had 30 people apply for the job, but only 19 actually made it through the entire process. The other piece in that too is, and as we're, you know, working to try to increase our number of applicants as drivers, is that our drivers are in a position where they have to maybe step out of work to go through the training and the classes and the driving, you know, to pass the test, which may take a number of hours, which does take a number of hours, not just like 10, but you're talking triple digit in hours, you know, to do this. So that means you have to sacrifice potentially monthly income to be able to go hopefully train and get yourself ready to get a bus driver job. So that's, I mean, it's not as easy as like, hey, Justin's exactly right. It is an open position constantly, year in, year out, 12 months of the year. There's open bus driver slots. And if everyone came in here and said they want to be, we would hire them. And this conversation around moving from 1 mile, down to 1 mile would not be an issue because we would have drivers to be able to do that. You know, and so Justin and I have spent a lot of time talking about how do we get to that place? Because we have buses, we just need drivers. You know, and compensation is one thing, but it's not all about compensation sometimes. It's about, you know, needing to be employed a longer period of time. It's about benefits. It's about not having to sacrifice a couple months of employment to be able to do the training, to be able to be trained, to be able to do the bus driver. And so, I mean, if you look at Justin's team, one, they're extremely diverse. They're very representative of the community that we serve. And that's a lot of work for a lot of our bus drivers who English is not their first language. They're new to Kent or even the country for that matter. And they put themselves through a lot of rigorous training and language acquisition to be able to get into this space where they can support our students in our community in that way. So just, you know, I don't want to, you know, to take too much time, but they work really, really hard, you know.
Is there a possibility that you could share with me the benefits, the pay, you know, the hours, so that, because I want to go and ask the community. There are those ones who have CDL. But I need that kind of, you know, to show them this is what that is, so therefore I can be part of the recruiting.
We have a flyer I can give you with, has all the information.
Right.
Yep.
Get that to the full board.
Right.
And we don't pay for the CDL process, right? Like, we don't have our own onboarding and training process, or do we?
Yes, we do.
Oh.
We have 5 state-certified driver trainers on staff that teach the candidates how to drive and then also how to prepare for the CDL test, pre-trip, the drive test. There's a whole OSPI mandate for training time, whole checkoff list to get a driver through that training process and authorized by OSPI.
And they get paid during the time?
They get a completion stipend currently, if they,
Nothing up until then?
not until they complete the training, yeah,
So it's a stipend.
Yes.
Yeah.
yeah.
Not a paid training, it's a stipend.
It's after the fact, you gotta pass the test.
Gotta pass the
That's right.
test.
Yep.
And then, but yeah, if you could share that with the rest of the board, I would really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Will do.
We'll do that.
Thank you, Mr. Dennison.
Nothing else for me.
I think I'm good.
Great. Okay.
Move on.
It is 6:06, and we've been here since 4:30. I'd like normally to give a break, but we have 2 policies left.
2 policies, let's
Can we
run
just,
through,
can we
please.
push through?
Let's push through.
Depends on how big they are.
I know.
Director Song, are you
I
okay
vote to
with?
push through it.
You want to push
Let's
through?
push through.
Hi there. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Sorry, I know it sounds like God's voice coming in there or something. I was wondering about the issue with hiring bus drivers. I know you had mentioned that the bus drivers only work, what was it, 32 hours a week, is that right?
It depends on the route, right?
It depends. A regular status bus driver could work a minimum 4 hours a day, so 20 hours a week is the lowest end for a regular driver. And some of our drivers who are coming in, that is what they are looking for, but not everybody. And then there's other opportunities out there to add to their time through extra preschool runs, shuttles, field trips, athletic trips, those sort of things.
Activities.
Activity routes, yep.
So what percentage of our drivers do we have that work, I'd say, close to 40 hours a week, 38 hours a week, 39 hours a week, somewhere in there?
Probably half of our bus drivers work 40 hours a week.
And so would there be any possibility of us being able to, I had an employer previously that provided us essentially a 35-hour or 37-hour, somewhere in that range, work week that we normally worked, and then the additional 3 hours were essentially given to us, and they would have training that we did during those hours occasionally, or basically we were able to do things that are needed, whatever came up, but we could just add it in there because we already had all that extra time every week anyway. And is that something that we are even able to do as a public agency, or is that basically like not a chance?
I would defer that to our finance and HR team.
I know it's a weird question. I had worked for a weird employer.
This is Ben. I don't know if he can see us.
I can see.
Okay.
I'm like.
Yeah, I mean, I guess
after
it depends. It depends to a great extent on what sort of assignment and contract we're giving these employees. If they are hourly workers, then we are routinely audited on verifying the nature of the work that is provided for the hours that we pay. So that is an easy answer. Not all of our workers are hourly, of course, and not all of our assignments are hourly. And I haven't spoken to any districts that really structure any of the assignments and transportation in any other way. So not to say that there isn't opportunities for creativity, but there isn't a simple precedent model out there that I'm aware of that would achieve what you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned that, it seems like hiring for bus drivers, as many of you had said, is an extreme difficulty for, and not only us, but all school districts. It just seems like we need to figure out what it is that we can do that makes it more advantageous for people to want to choose Kent if they're going to be a bus driver. And I don't know what that would be, but that was just a thought that I had regarding that.
Yes, this is Ben again, and I agree that there's, this is an ongoing conversation that we have had as a district. I will say, however, that we're here talking about Kent School District and Kent School District's challenges. This is bullet point number 3 in virtually every regional meeting that I'm at, with districts struggling with not just this particular assignment, but other similar assignments. So I just want to make it clear that this is not necessarily a unique challenge or failing of the Kent School District, but is a sort of a regional, and dare I say even beyond that, labor challenge for bus driver and like assignments in school districts. But your request to sort of think outside of the box, those are conversations we have had and other districts have had. And I imagine we'll continue to have.
Do we have any data or stats on, I guess, feedback from people leaving the field or trying to enter the field?
We're talking bus drivers now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would defer.
Nothing other than the survey that all employees receive at the end, with their separation form.
And is that collected and used in any way? Like, are we coding those responses? And
That's provided in your board every month, or every regular board meeting when we approve the personnel report.
Yeah.
That's included in there.
No, I mean like the subjective data and the narratives from it. Like, not that people are leaving and going, but.
No, the reason why they're leaving is included in there. I asked for that last year, and Mr. Hunter started providing that, so it's been in there about a year.
Oh, no, I've seen those, but those are very subjective, not in a way that we can statistically analyze that. Has there been any efforts in any school districts, or even through WASDA or OSPI, to actually try to look into what the workforce challenges look like? Because, I mean, sure, you can have a narrative summary where people just kind of tell you everything. You can group that and code it and try to look for a pattern. But do we have any, structured tool that we can actually have people fill out pre and post so that we can actually see what's causing people not to want to enter this field?
Yeah, I'll have, thanks
So
for
Director
clarifying,
Song,
Mr.
so we
Hunter.
do have an exit survey that is voluntary for staff who are exiting the workplace here at KSD. We don't have a pre, but that's something that we can look at and work on. And so what we do with the information for the staff who voluntarily complete the exit survey, we share it with the respective supervisor for the reflection piece in terms of what can we do differently in terms of what we're hearing as to why individuals are exiting the workplace.
Okay, yeah, my research brain is just going, and I'm just wondering how can we actually utilize those surveys other than using our own biases just by reading the feedback and assuming that that's the primary reason. So I didn't know if there's anything more, I guess, formalized in terms of tracking the exodus or lack of motivation.
I don't know, attrition also, it's not because they don't want to be here, but also retirements.
Yeah.
Things like,
Aging workforce.
Yeah.
Retirement's the main piece,
reason.
and for most, it's a second career after an initial retirement
Right.
that, they're working until 65, 67, and then deciding to take a retirement at that point.
So my only other question on this is, so if we've got roughly half of our bus drivers are doing, roughly 40 hours a week, is there a barrier for them on the overtime? I know one of my other previous positions that I worked in, they were very stringent on overtime, which made it a barrier to the employees as they, if you wanted to do overtime, you wanted to make more money, there was no real way to do so, and so people would leave because of that. Is that the same here? Or do they have the ability to do overtime if they want to? If they don't, then they don't have to. What's the, I guess, the situation like as far as overtime for bus drivers?
There is some overtime available. We have a system for doing that. Typically, what it is, it's a posting process, and when we have an assignment available, we're going to take everybody first who doesn't have overtime, and then if there's something left over at that point, then they can start to have overtime offered. So it's not a guarantee. We try to limit overtime as much as possible, and on a weekly basis, there's probably a handful of drivers that go into overtime, and it is seniority based.
I see. Is there any thought to, I guess, other work that they could do in between, allowing them to fill out that 8-hour day to make it more of a full-time job for those that do want it? If I don't know what the like the number of people that aren't getting full-time work that would like full-time work, but is that a barrier that you're seeing, or is that not something that is a concern?
I think for our new drivers that are onboarding, because it's a seniority-based system, that there are times where they would like more work than is available to them, and we educate them on the options that could help them get more time. But we don't offer, like, oh, you want more time, here's something around our facility to do. It's always based about, a route, run, trip, transporting students.
Is there any option for us to do so? Is that something that that we could do if we were able?
If we could establish what was needed and it was productive, and probably needs to be built into the collective bargaining agreement too, to outline what's allowable and acceptable.
Mm-hmm. And as far as I guess like other types of benefits, say getting school paid for, or I'm just trying to think outside the box, like things that we could offer that would make it more like make people want to go and do it, because it seems like as long as I've ever seen it in schools, it's always been an issue. God, even when I was a kid, they were always having issues like keeping bus drivers, and it seems like, and I know it's not, it's difficult because of the constraints that we have, but there seems like there has to be a way that we can manage that so that it isn't an issue, and we don't have to extend the distance for our kids walking in possibly unsafe environments, the way that many parents have concerns about. That we should be able to find a way to increase our staffing on that side, so that that's no longer something that we have to, an idea that we have to entertain. Because I would imagine the studies show that riding a bus is probably safer than walking to school, outside of very close to school. But once you get past that mile range, I would imagine that it is much safer for those kids to be on a bus than to not.
Director Cook, thank you for that. And thanks for joining us. I know you've been pretty busy at camp, and we thank you for that, volunteering. Our team will continue to explore. I think that's a yes and to all those pieces, and continue to explore all those options to attract and retain as many bus drivers as possible in the future. So I appreciate your thoughts and ideas and suggestions.
Yeah, thank you. That's all I had as far as this one goes. I know you guys were just closing up on this one.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Dennison.
Okay, we're on to 1610, conflicts of interest. This notes that a director or officer may now enter into a contract with the district to offer goods or services as long as the sum doesn't exceed $3,000 per calendar month under the contract. This is new language to us because we've recently updated it. WASDA used to call out, because of the legislature, $1,500. It's now up to $3,000. And it also talks about voting on contracts with beneficial interest, employment of spouse in a district. Questions?
Is there, is there anything that has changed regarding my particular situation regarding the law changing?
Can you,
I read through it, but I didn't see anything, but then again, I am not a lawyer by any means, so.
can you clarify your question, Director Cook?
Is there anything that is impactful to the situation of a director having a spouse that works in the district legally? Has there been any change made?
Thank you. Yeah, I just didn't get that.
If you take a look, I don't know if you can see the screen, Director Cook. Are you able to? The first,
yes, I can.
The first red portion here, the first paragraph there, just talks about a director may not vote on the authorization, approval, or ratification of a contract in which they're beneficially interested. All this language is additional, but again, this has been updated twice since we've updated ours.
Yes, so to answer your question, in the messaging in that first paragraph, it's specific to what it has been, direct beneficiary. I know that that's been language that previous boards have also understood, so I believe it has the same message in terms of, you know, what has stayed throughout.
Sorry, I had to get back over to the microphone button there. All right, yeah, it looks fairly similar. I did notice in the change in the law that they changed it in such a way that if you are an employee, like if you were to have a job as an employee of a district, of a school district that is, that you would no longer be able to do so, essentially, as far as I could tell. Whereas before you could take the same up to, I think, $1,500, and now they've removed that ability for any district of a first class size. But I noticed that they did not change that for some reason in the legislature on contracts. Is that something that we could change to so that those two match up and that we are being more restrictive as we want to be, as you know, protective of the public's funds and such, so that if you were to have that there would be no contract allowed with anyone, regardless. Is that something that we could change?
Well, I think it's an RCW, so I'll double check it, but that's the reason I believe the language of the dollar amount went up. The RCW actually increased, so I believe if it's an RCW, but I will double check that language.
Yes, it is in fact an RCW, you are correct. As far as what I had read, my question was about, because they did change the RCW such that, because right now a municipality, so say the city of Kent, cannot hire or have a contract with one of the Kent City Council members. They can't have a $3,000 contract. In a school district, you can. That is something that is allowed by RCW. But it seems to have been a carve-out that was done by, I would imagine, a special interest group of some sort. Is that something that we can be more restrictive on in requiring no contracts of any sort of any board member for any dollar amount?
So I'll share my recommendation as superintendent, and then I'd open up to the board that, and you did see and acknowledge that it is a whack, and my recommendation is to remain with that. However, policy is the board's work, and so I would ask the board to weigh in on this, but that would be my recommendation.
And so just curious, but why is your recommendation different for that than it is for, say, the situation that was dealing with 1669, as that is more restrictive than the existing law?
So I'm going to respectfully decline to comment on your second question there. I am going to repeat what I said of why, and that is because it is WASDA language. Other WASDA folks have recommended the language. That is the reason I'd recommend it. But again, I would leave it to the board to have the conversation about that restrictive.
Knowledge as to how often you do not follow WASDA policy? Or when you would suggest that we don't follow WASDA policy, or like how that?
No, I do not have that at this. I don't have that at this moment.
Okay.
Yeah, this is a tough one, because I mean, technically this means that I could contract with Kent School District as long as I don't contract into anything greater than $3,000, right? Is that what I read in the first part? Okay.
But the fact is, it's making it public.
Yeah.
And all the board is informed of it.
Yeah. All the board's informed of it. It's in your F1 statement that the community could pull at any time.
Yeah. Yep.
And also that you were.
But they did remove the ability of city councils and others in those types of roles to be able to do that, as far as I can tell. And so that's the part that I'm a little, I guess, hesitant for us to make a choice that seems to be specific to school districts in the way that they've chosen to change the law. And to me, it seems much more appropriate that we would go towards the idea of going with more restriction. And as far as I know, there's no reason why we couldn't choose to do so.
Yep, if I can. Having served on the city council, there's a significant difference in the nature of the job. All of your city services are organized by departments, and to hold the job, you must be qualified in a specific manner. And the trap here, of course, is in the world of education, you clearly have a wide range of services, and frequently that can simply be devolved down to some form of consultancy, which you can't do at City Hall because you have to be certified in that particular realm.
I highlighted an important part of this policy as well, that the contracts there will be a log of the contracts, and they're available for public inspection for full transparency.
Do we have any of those contracts currently?
I'm sorry?
Are there any contracts of that sort within the district now?
No. No board member has disclosed any.
Yeah,
Okay.
not to my knowledge.
And so there's no one currently that would have to, that this would be a problem for. And I understand.
Yeah, but we're also not trying to think of ourselves, we're also thinking of future, because the policy we make now, it's gonna affect future board. So a future board that is providing service to the district, that is vital to the district, if it's known and they're not gonna vote on it and they're recusing themselves, I don't see the issue that might come up.
I have a very nuanced question, again, thinking about like future proofing, and maybe Spencer Pan can help me with this one. If the district gets sued and the parent, because of their IEP, is like, I want to use Andy's company for my behavior supports in the classroom, and the legal contract and agreement says parent's decision on agency, and I charge more than $3,000, does this is that negated by this? Or does the legal contract between the parent and the school district on who the parent decides to contract to provide services for their kid trump this policy?
So I would ask the board to have that conversation about what your thoughts are.
I would say that you would follow the WAC, and that even though a parent would say that, I mean, a parent could say, they want Megan. I'm not certified, I'm not allowed to. So just because a parent decides that they put down that they want something doesn't mean that Andy would be able to say, you wouldn't decline. So I would imagine that that would be the situation.
But it would come down to moral character, right? Like, I would have to personally be like, nope, this isn't right, I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
But if we allow this language to persist, 30 years from now, I'm gone,
Yeah.
and somebody else doesn't have that same characteristic,
Yeah.
right? So could this open up the possibility that somebody could get around that?
Actually, Superintendent Vela, correct me, but the second we start offering services to students, we have liability. And under that circumstance, clearly, all the dotted i's and crossed t's has to be in that.
Yeah, and that's why I asked the board to talk about their experiences to this, and then I was going to chime in, but I'll go ahead and say that any contract that we enter, it's scrutinized for that perspective, and so there is liability in there. There are indemnification sections of contracts that we need to make sure that are there, language that is there, so that's what I was going to say after the board discussed this fully.
Yeah, no, I asked because when it comes to the legal portion of that, if a family's litigating for those behavior supports in schools, right? There's also clauses in there that says that the identified service has to be identified within a time frame. There's not a lot of people who do what I do. And so in that event, because of the lack of options, and if nobody else is willing to provide that service in Kent School District, and parents like, well, it's either Andy or nobody, and we're winning this lawsuit, and it says that we have to have this service, and I ended up charging $20,000 in that month. Would I be able to do that now because there's nothing in the policy that restricts it?
I think the policy says 3,000.
3,000. Yeah. And that's based on the law.
Yeah, but how does that, I guess that's where it comes into that litigation though, right? Like when a family sues a school district and the school district has to comply with that, how does that work?
So what I would say then is I would not want to give legal advice not having that experience. What I would say is what I said earlier is that we do then, once a contract is there, is that they are our students, and so there is liability there, and so, but we are covered, and we would seek the legal advice of our counsel.
Okay. Again, not that I would,
No,
but
yeah.
if there's somebody in this position that could, is there any protection on KSD for that? That way another board member
Absolutely.
doesn't utilize that knowing that there's no other competition in the area.
Yep, there is protection, and so again, I would say that we would, and always consult legal counsel on any we would not enter contracts that would either expose the district in a way, that is part of my job to make sure that exposure is definitely not there, and so that's why I would enter in that legal counsel advice.
Okay.
So as far as I understand it, the purpose of us allowing a board member to have a contract with the district would be that there is an inability to hire for that work in contract form, obviously, such that we cannot find someone to do that otherwise. So that's why we are allowing this person to have this contract. Is that like that sort of thing? That seems to be why, but the legislature has decided to change that regarding employment, but not on contracts. And that's the part that I wonder about, because to me that seems a strange difference that they would enumerate school districts for one, but would not add school districts for the other.
It doesn't bother me, and I'll say why. I can think of circumstances that would make sense. I don't know this, but I'm assuming that there's only so many people who provide fire extinguishers right now in the area for, I don't know, maybe there's a lot. But there is it is possible to think about that there's a number of things that we contract with because we don't hire somebody to do that specific job within our district, that I can imagine that it is possible that we have somebody that does something that we contract with for an amount less than $3,000 a month, that it makes sense for them to still be able to represent the community as a board director, not vote on anything that would have any bearing on that contract, and still be able to provide the services that whatever it is contracted for. I can imagine a circumstance that makes sense. I also think that it is paramount to say that we have none of those within our current board makeup that anybody has disclosed, that I don't think any of us do. And, but that to me is very different than an employee of, where such as things as contract negotiations and things like that that's very different to me as an employee of compared to a contract worker of. You're not getting your benefits from there. You're not getting the protections of an employee that you have through all of our regulations and our policies and our procedures. There's just a lot of things that are different as a contract employee that is different. I'm going in circles here again, but it's different than an employee.
And including, you may have to be self-insured. I mean, those are things that would be in the contract.
Yeah.
Right.
And if you wanted to provide the service, you just couldn't charge over $3,000 a month.
Right.
Even if you could get it that somewhere else at a higher rate.
Right.
Yeah, and I understand all of those points. I just look at the way that this is set up, and the school district is not added into that group for this one thing. All those other agencies are. School districts themselves are the only ones that don't have this restriction. So every other municipality in the entire state of Washington cannot hire anyone for any contract if they are the elected official above them. And yet school districts specifically can. But they do it differently when you're talking about wages, and I do understand that. But it seems like their point being that they specify the size there of a county with a population of 125,000 or more, a city with a population of 1,500, and then an irrigation district more than 50,000 acres. And we are far larger than any of those metrics for the most part. I mean, we have, 125,000 people in one portion of Kent, let alone the entirety, which is probably 300,000 or 400,000 in the entire district. And so I think the point of the legislature here is trying to say, hey, when you're this large, you can find someone to do that work. There's no possibility of, and they've already enumerated that. They've said there's no contract available to the city of Kent to be able to do anything at $3,000 or at $100. It doesn't matter. You need to go find someone to go do that work. And you have a large enough population. You have 300,000-400,000 people around you. You can find someone that is going to be able to do that work. And that's why they did it that way. To me, I look at this and I say, well, why is the school district taken out of the hiring of an employee, but not taken out of the contract? And that, to me, says that I don't think that was correct in the legislature. I think that should be changed. I don't see any reason. There's no job that can't be done by someone that is not tied to the Kent School District. And that doesn't mean that we're saying there's no school district that can have that happen, but our school district itself, I mean, we're number 5 in the entire state. There's well over, 200 or so school districts here. And that to me says we don't need to be looking towards employees of, or looking at, officers and directors of the Kent School District for contracts at this point. That seems to me like that they were trying to do the right thing here, and then the second portion just seems like it kind of fell on its face when it comes to school districts, and maybe that was on purpose. And I assume for some school districts that might be true. If you're down at in a county of 126,000, or you're in a city with 1,550 people, right? That's going to be a pretty small school district, and that would be hard to do. So changing the wording might have to be done in that case. But we're not talking about changing the law for the entire state. We're talking about just hearing intent and whether or not we want to do that.
Yeah.
Whether we think that goes far enough, and I'm just suggesting maybe it doesn't.
No, Director Cook, I appreciate your points. What I was going to add is what you just said. The legislative body has avenues for changing law, creating law, and the body in our state that can even offer a language for law. I go back to this body, which is a policy-making body, which is our board, and this is your policy, and that's why I asked the board to have that conversation, and I think they've had it, unless there's other points.
I would prefer to stick with the language, and I'll just make up an example. School psychologists. So number one, there's a national shortage. Number two, the agency of a school psychologist is to be certified for national testing standards to make kids eligible for respective services. And the question I have for you is, right now, we're adequately staffed, but the conceivable idea that you might have a, I don't know, board director with a spouse who's a retired school psychologist, and very simply, their ability to fill in, should there be staffing shortages because you're running up against deadlines with all the IEPs and 401 plans, et cetera, you could conceivably say, to get through this logjam, I might want a temporary fix. And I wouldn't want to preclude that because it's the unique pass-through function of federal money. And we don't have control over that, and you have to be certified to make any arrangements. So it would be unusual, but not impossible.
Or I can add to that, which is a retired bus driver.
Yes.
Who wants to continue serving and make sure that they do a part-time job for us. We are limiting them not to be on the board.
Well, they would, yeah, but they would be an employee. I think it's a little bit different.
Right. I mean, they're a spouse. If they're a spouse of a director that is now serving, would we say that person, you have to quit because your spouse has been just...
Just in the interest of time, I'm sorry, Ms. Holly. We have this, while this isn't a motion, obviously, because we're just looking at policy. Anybody, Andy, your thoughts on changing the language to remove that?
I don't have an opinion right now.
We need to, we need to know if we need to change it or not.
I mean, can we do a second reading?
With the language as it is, we need to know if we need to change it from the language here or change the language. But we would do it, we would move it to the second reading with the language as it is what you're asking for?
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Fine.
Fine.
I'm with that too. Director Cook, four of us are saying that we're good with the language as it is. I would also suggest that as a board, we have the right to not approve contracts. So if somebody has a contract here and we don't like that a director has an interest in it, we don't do that contract.
One point on that is you left me out on that, and I would have been fine with us reading it again. And so I don't appreciate that I was just assumed that I was going to be a no on that. But outside of that, I wanted to address the two concerns that Director Clark and Vice President Farah had on that. First off, with Director Clark's suggestion of a school psychologist, That's an employment, I would believe, unless you're talking a contract, in which case that would be separate. And I don't know if we would be able to write language that would make it harder for us to do without making it impossible, but that would be that portion. As to Vice President Faraz's question on the bus driver situation, they actually have a separate carve-out by the law. We wouldn't be able to do anything about that. If I wanted to be a bus driver as a director, that is an allowed thing. It actually states in there that you can do that as long as the terms of your contract are the same.
Yep.
So that's all I have to say, and I would like to have a second reading of this, so I agree with that.
With the language as it is today, or with changed language, just to clarify, I'm sorry.
With the language the way it is, or if we change it either way, I would be happy to discuss it further.
Okay.
So second reading meaning move it to another policy work session or talk about it at an approval on the dais?
I believe it's moving it to approval on the dais.
Okay. I do want to point out.
Not within consent agenda, basically, so that we do actually.
No, it would have to be
No.
discussion and approval.
Yes.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I will point out, sorry.
To clarify, the ones that are just given as informational, that would be the procedure that follows the policy.
Right.
So the policy we would bring up in full discussion and voting up and down.
Can we move this to another policy work session?
Okay, for what?
I just want more time to be able to kind of read through this, and I just want a chance to have thoughts before we just move it to approval. I don't think tonight is enough time to make a careful decision, and so I personally would just like another work session.
Okay, we move it to another work session.
I just want to point out that it says director or officer in the first part. It doesn't talk about a spouse, so it's only a sitting board member.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so this will be in September.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll move that to another policy work session. Okay.
Now, just to clarify, this doesn't mean that we don't still follow the law as it is, even though our policy hasn't changed, right? Like, because the law has changed.
Nope, we're still stuck with the 1,500 with what it was before, because that's what our policy says.
Okay.
So no, we're not following the current law.
Well, I mean, if there's something that's more restrictive in the law than what our policy states, the law still supersedes, right?
Actually, our policy now does not even mention 1,500. It's no monetary interest at this moment.
Okay, so then we would be at 3,000, which would be the state law anyway, because that's more conservative?
We're prescriptive by our policy right now of no monetary interest. That's
No
the way it is
monetary
right
interest.
now.
Okay, so this would allow for us to have up to 3,000?
Yes,
Okay.
That is the change that with this policy.
correct.
I'm just going to voice my concern that as a policymaking group, everybody has, well, they've had access to these always, because all of our policies are online, and we've had access to these for 5 days at least. Ms. Holly, maybe more?
Since last Friday.
Yep, so I encourage people to, September seems a really long time to kick the can on this one, so, without a specific reason why. Next one?
Last one, policy 1620, the board superintendent relationship and the superintendent's duties. This basically is just a combination of our previous policy, the superintendent's duties, combined with WASDA's policy, the board superintendent relationship.
So one question on that, though. So what is driving this change? Is it because WASDA's changed? Is it because the law itself has
Right.
changed?
We're just combining policy. They had in this policy the board superintendent relationship. We called it the superintendent's duties. We're just combining the two under this same policy number. The green is, I'm sorry?
Are there no new laws that are, or changes to the law that have driven WASDA changing what they're doing?
I don't believe so. They updated this in February of 2013. We haven't done it since 2005. So it's just housekeeping, basically. The green is the new WASDA, the black is what we had before. That's the only change.
And so as far as what we're using compared to what WASDA has, which parts are added?
The green, all in the green.
Well, no, I mean from our side, like, because WASDA's policy has less than ours in this instance. Is that
Yes,
right?
we had superintendent's duties under this policy, which you can see in the black. And that was all there beforehand. We're just combining WASDA's policy with ours.
So which policy did it fall under before with the superintendent's duties section? As far as WASDA is concerned, did they have a policy that had that, or was it just never part of their?
It was not part of theirs.
Okay, and it never has been?
I can't answer that. I don't know for sure.
Oh.
There
So
is an
what is the purpose
RCW
of
on
that
it, though.
section? Sorry, what was that, Megan?
There is an RCW on what the superintendent's duties are.
I see. But it's not included in the policy?
It is.
It is.
We have it
We're
included.
referencing that RCW.
I see. But the WASDA policy doesn't include it? But that's the part I'm confused on, because it, like, they don't have that particular portion in there anywhere, but it's in law? Is that right?
Well, let me check through. Part of this language that's in here may be part of the RCW. We can pull it up and look.
Yeah, I did pull it up.
You did pull it up?
Yeah, it mostly, well, you can pull it up and we can read it.
There's the language of the RCW on superintendent's duties.
So one thing that I'm concerned on reading this is that first and second line stating that they shall attend all meetings of the board of directors and cause to have made a record as to the proceedings thereof. That doesn't seem to leave much leeway to, anything. I mean, as far as I understand, the word shall means you don't have an option. They have to attend every board of director meeting. Am I reading that correctly?
I'm sure that there's, and I would defer to looking through all the RCWs, that there's also an allowance for a delegate or a deputy. That's pretty common.
It does talk about, unless specifically limited, the superintendent may delegate to other staff the exercise of any powers and the discharge of any duties imposed by district policy or a vote of the board.
Yep.
Which one is that?
Let's see. Give me just a minute to find it. I will. Director Cook, I may have to get back to you on it. Might take me a bit to find it, but this is language that I know I quoted from WASDA's. They give a little update on how things have changed, and I can get back to you with the language that's in the RCW.
Yeah,
Was it?
I just don't see it.
I just didn't see it. Superintendent's duties? Second one, okay, let me go back.
Did you have other, so we can continue to talk as they're looking for this? Was there a separate question that you had, Director Cook?
Oh, I just was surprised in how forceful that language was, due to the fact that it seems like it doesn't, like the only way that I can see how you would avoid having a meeting without the superintendent at that point would be to not have a meeting. I don't know. I don't know how, I mean, obviously we haven't done that. So, and obviously, you know, the world hasn't fallen apart. So it's not, I don't know if that's even really a problem. It just seems odd to me in the way that it was written.
We have had delegated authority, though.
Wade has acted as.
Yeah.
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 That we have delegates, and I do have, I mean, I'll liken it to, you know, I do.
Well, I understand the delegation of authority and whatnot. That part I'm not concerned about. It's the way that this is written. There's not even an option of delegation of authority.
I actually believe there is. I just need to find it, and I can sure get back to you with it.
Certainly, it's not something we need to hold everyone up with.
Yeah, designee as we've used, I'll bring you back to my leave request. There had to be a designee. The district would not have run without that, so it is definitely aligned with state law.
But, you know, it does make sense. I think it's interesting that you did bring that up, though, because I think it does make sense, right? The difference of the body that kind of is that strategic vision, budgetary, and then the implementation of it. So you really do need to have both halves of the equation for things to happen. So I just more kind of intellectually, I agree with you. I find it interesting, the language that was used there.
It also talks about the results. The superintendent is still responsible, even if he or she has a designee. Superintendent is always responsible for what's done.
Yeah, so I wonder if in that case it's not a designee, but a someone that is essentially the superintendent while they're out. Does that make sense? So that you're no longer the superintendent during that period, I would imagine?
I think that they would still, I mean, I would imagine, not imagine, I know that when a superintendent is at a conference, they are still the superintendent of our school district and will remain in that. They're under contract as that. And yet the powers that they are serving under, such as secretary of the board, can still maintain and happen so the board can continue its processes while still having a secretary of a board as designated by the superintendent in their capacity. So we would have, that doesn't, I think that maybe you're thinking about, I don't know what you're thinking about specifically, I'm not going to claim to that, but I'm thinking about West Wing and when the president got shot, right? So, and he gave the powers over.
Yeah.
I think we're looking at something a little different than that. So the superintendent remains our superintendent, even when they're in a conference in exciting places like Walla Walla. And then we get to, I like Walla Walla, actually. It's fun to go to. But we would still have a designee so we can continue our processes on as a board.
Yeah. Yeah, I just was curious about that because I hadn't ever looked this deeply into it.
Yeah.
When I came across that wording, I was like, that seems strange.
No, I think the intellectual of it is interesting. I also am noticing that it's 7 o'clock and we do have this being a special meeting. We are bound by our time constraints.
Yeah.
So I wanted to see if there's anything else specifically to the language of this
I
that we.
think, President Margell, I think we have it for 7:30.
Oh.
Yeah, yes.
Well, look at
Thank
us.
you, yes.
Okay, good, then.
Appreciate that.
I like your thought.
Well, no, I
Clark?
want to make sure that we get out all of our
Nope.
questions and finish this one fully.
We
It's
do
our
have
last
till
one.
7:30.
All right.
Yes, okay, good.
Thank you.
Is there anything on changes on this one? I like the language that does talk about the superintendent's duties personally.
Right.
I'm just curious why it's called out on here for us, but in WASDA policy, it's not there. It just like, anytime they're doing something different than WASDA policy, I'm always just a little curious as to why.
I think it's just a combination. We had it there, it makes sense.
But I mean, like the more stuff you add into something, the more complicated it becomes just by necessity, right? So the more things you add into something, the more it makes you have to like be into something that isn't necessarily needed. And so that's where I don't know, is that whole section necessary? If WASDA doesn't think it's necessary, why do we think it's necessary more so, and in such a way that we think we need to put that in there? Like, what's the purpose that we have that WASDA didn't think it was necessary?
If I may, I mean, just like your suggestion in the last one, that not always are we going to follow exactly what, and actually, I think last time with the last makeup of the board, we had somebody that said all the time, we don't always have to follow WASDA policy. We have our district policy, so we do look at the WASDA. RCWs are a little bit different, right? And so I think that we can look at it and make sure it fits the needs of our district. And so I think you were the one who suggested in the last one, well, I know you were, the one that suggested that maybe we want to have something a little bit different. And so on this one, I think that we have the language that fits our district. I like the wording of it.
But also, it says right there, superintendent may delegate to other administrative advisory employees in our policy. So that's one of the reasons why we have to have that language, so that we can give our superintendent to designate.
But that's, you can't supersede law necessarily. You can make it more restrictive, but you can't make it less restrictive.
Correct.
And so that's where my concern would be, is if we are making it less restrictive than what the law says, then we are no longer following the law, in which case that opens us up to issues. I would imagine. I mean, I am no lawyer, obviously, but if we are doing, and that's separate from the difference between WASDA and our policy, but if we're not following RCW and something were to happen, whatever that might be, and we aren't following that, now we've broken the law as a school district, and that opens us up to litigation, does it not?
I'll find that language because I know I saw it, so.
But
I mean, that's, yeah, and that's.
legal is not here, so if legal was here, we would have asked the legal to answer that question.
And this isn't deciding things tonight, so
Right.
it's just a discussion, so it's not something we need to like have an answer for right before we vote on it or anything. But the other part for my question on WASDA's policy versus our own is that, like, I feel like if we're going to have additional or whatnot, or if we change WASDA policy, or we remove parts, or we add parts, we should have a very, very good reason why. Because the people at WASDA, that's essentially their entire job is to provide example policies for all districts in Washington State. And so I feel like, when was this section added? Was this recent, or was this something that was done, decades ago, or?
Well, WASDA's was updated in February of 2013, so it's been quite some time.
And the superintendent's duties section of ours, is that?
2005, 2005.
Okay.
It's been there a very long time, and it's a discretionary policy.
Yeah. So, President Margell, I recommend to you to, based on what the board is discussion, is moving it to discussion and approval, and we will have legal counsel there, just like any other one, and that we could definitely, Director Cook, make sure that is answered, but that'd be my recommendation.
Oh, and for the RCW, it's 28A 400-030. I think the part that covers the handing over of duties is number 6, where it also says that we can tell the superintendents additional roles and responsibilities. So in our policy, it states that we can have the designee.
Yep.
And then
Thank you.
reference that RCW in our policy.
Carry out all orders of the board of directors made. I see.
But even then,
That
we'll
does
double
make
check it.
sense.
Thank you.
So would we need to, like, in that case, would we need to basically have a motion made by the board to do that sort of thing? So that, I just want to make sure we're following the law the way it's meant to be done. Or is it something that we could just put into policy and we're good?
Yeah, so the language as it is Director Song did look it up, I knew it was somewhere there, that, yes, we would follow it, move to discussion and approval at our next meeting, and it'd be in effect.
I think he's asking a different question.
Oh,
I think the question he's asking is if the superintendent is giving a designee, does that have to be as a motion in front of the board?
no, it does not.
Okay, that's what I wanted to make sure. Like,
Yeah, sorry.
I thought that it was probably we could change it in policy on our end, and because we've done that, now number 6 takes care of that for us going forward, and we can just assume that we are giving them authorization through our policy.
And the other piece is the procedure would make sure that that would be in there as well, so.
Okay, that makes sense. That's where I was a little concerned. I just want to make sure that we did it correctly, I guess, if that makes sense.
Nope.
Especially since we haven't touched it in, almost 20 years.
Right. Thank you, Director Cook.
18 policies.
Yay.
Give
Thank
yourselves a
you.
hand.
And it was exciting.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, I said it at the
I
onset.
agree with you.
So I
missed the exciting part. What was that?
I want to just take a
Oh,
moment.
you missed it, Director Cook. It was exciting.
May I just take a moment to thank our board for the work that today. I did mention it was going to be long, a lot of policy, but I think this is our work. This is board work. And it's hard work, it's tedious work, but it's important that we all contribute to the conversation. So I appreciated that today. Every single one of our board members contributed to policy, good thought, and follow up as we talked about in the last one. So thank you. And thank you to my staff for all the effort you put into. I did want to let board know that my staff does look at these policies prior to coming to these work sessions so that we're able to look at law, look at those different things that need to happen. And I want to thank my staff as well. So President Margell, I'll turn to you too here.
I appreciate that we got through so many of them and were able to discuss, and people just being prepared. So it is 7:07 and we are adjourned.
Thank you. Thank you.